You're about to enjoy a nice, deep breath because a dear friend of the morning show is here. They're calling her new book a welcome invitation to draw close to the one who created us and still cares for us. I already feel a little more peaceful. How about you? Hi, I'm Erica with Eryn Lynum. She's author of the book Rooted in Wonder, and her latest, I've got in my hands right here, The Nature of Rest. It's wonderful. Eryn is also a master naturalist, a Bible teacher, and the host of the Nat Theo podcast. Your kids will love it, and you will too, I promise. Eryn, so good to have you back on Spirit 105.3. How are you?
Good. How are you, Erica?
I am delighted to hear your peaceful, beautiful voice again, and congratulations on your lovely new book.
Oh, thank you so much. That means so much to me.
I'm so drawn to the title, The Nature of Rest, but the subtitle too gets me. What the Bible and creation teach us about Sabbath living. Now, if you're new to the faith, the Sabbath is what the Lord asks us to take every Sunday, just a time to rest. The Lord created the earth in 6 days and he rested on the seventh, and he knows this is good for us. But Eryn, you're talking about Sabbath living, mixing rest into your daily life. And that is so attractive to me. So how does living this way make a difference in your life?
I think we often think about Sabbath incorrectly. I know I did for a long time.
Yeah.
In that we see it as this strict command or stifling or something we've tried and maybe failed a few different times. And it's hard. It is hard. And I think for my family, I know what we had to do is change our mind around what Sabbath is, what it looks like. And when we started seeing it as a gift and something that God's inviting us into and a celebration, that's when it became something that we enjoyed practicing and that was life-giving in our home. So one way we often think about it is the word Sabbath comes from the Hebrew Shabbat, which can mean to both stop and delight.
Yes.
And we see that that's what God did. After he created everything, he stopped. And I believe it was to delight in everything he had just made. So Sabbath, we need to come at it with this delight attitude and okay, what are those regular things we're going to stop and set aside for this time? And what are the things that we are going to delight in?
Yes. I love looking at it that way, especially how God paused and delighted in all that he had made. But I want to talk about the thing that gets in the way. We are all busy people, right? And I want to pause and delight. How do you train yourself as a busy woman living in this world?
That's such a good way to put it. Train yourself, because Sabbath and rest are truly a practice. They're going to be messy. And just going into it knowing that is really helpful. And so our family, we really approach these rhythms of rest, and a weekly rhythm, of course, being Sabbath. And I always encourage people, you don't have to start with a full day. If that just seems unattainable or overwhelming, start with 4 hours. Carve out a 4-hour chunk to just begin stopping your regular activities and getting back to delight. And then daily rhythms of rest. I call those in the book Selah pauses. You think about that term Selah in the Psalms, an intentional pause and stop to rest, to reflect, to redirect if needed. And so for me, that looks like pausing throughout the day. I actually start with one in the morning by just sitting in silence with the Lord and just sensing his delight in me, not even praying, not even reading. I get there eventually, but just sitting with the Lord. And then throughout my day, stepping outside for 5 minutes or going for a walk outside. Or one of my favorite practices for this is reciting Psalm 23, whether out loud or in my mind. But when you think about Psalm 23, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. I repeat that stanza, I shall not want. I add that to the end of every line. So the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures, I shall not want. He leads me beside still, quiet, that word means restful, waters, I shall not want. And what we do when we pause for 5 minutes to go through that psalm in that way is we are removing ourselves from a place of discontent, because discontent drives us to hurry and hustle, and returning to a place of contentment and resting in the Lord's promises and provision.
Oh, Oh, that is so beautiful. I feel like I'm a hurrier and a hustler, Eryn. So when I hear you say those words, I see myself in them. But I want to learn. I want to train myself how to slow down and just receive God's love for me. I'm always pressing forward, go, go. And I'm wondering, I want to ask you this question written on the back of your book. What can a hummingbird's flight and a bee's waggle dance reveal about a restful and flourishing life? I want to know.
Well, it's so interesting when we look at nature because God really did create all of nature to thrive through rest. And that's really where this book came from. As I work as a master naturalist. And so I'm looking at all of God's designs in nature and asking, what can these teach us about our creator? And I began to see all these instances. And let's look at the hummingbird. So the hummingbird, when you think about a hummingbird, what do you picture?
Oh, they're so cute. I picture this tiny little bird, its little wings going like 1,000,000 miles a minute, but it's doing its work.
Exactly. It's going about its God-given work. And to do that, its wings are flapping about 70 times every second or 4,200 times a minute, right? And then to do that, its tiny little heart has to beat about 1,200 times a minute. So it is always on the go. Even when it's stopping to hover over a flower, it's still flapping those wings because it needs to visit about 1,000 to 2,000 flowers every single day. So this hummingbird, it's doing this fruitful work that God designed it for. But what sustains it is a beautiful strategy called torpor. And torpor is kind of like a mini hibernation where the bird is going to lower its body temperature by about 50 degrees and go into a deeply restful, actually unresponsive state. So it's this beautiful harmony of fruitful work and deep intentional rest. And I believe that's God's idea of rest. It's not just stopping. It's not useless. It's not idle. It's not lazy. Instead, it's this harmony of rest and work together.
That is so freeing, Eryn, because it tells me that God kind of did make me a go person. Like, Eric, I want you to go. I've given you work to do, but I also want you to pause. So there's freedom in that, in knowing that there is space for both if I make the space. Right, Eryn?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay, we have to talk about the bees waggle dance because I need to know more about that. That's just fun to say.
It's so fun to say. So when you think about a bee, just like the hummingbird, you think about busy bee, that they're always on the go. They actually have all these different jobs as they go through their life stages. They'll switch jobs. And a forager bee is the bee that's going to go and collect nectar and pollen to bring back to the hive so that they can create all the honey and go about all the work that God gave them to do. And so the forager bee, they go out and they find the good flowers. And when they come back, they have to communicate to the other forager bees where those flowers are. So they do this crazy movement called the waggle dance. It's a flight in a figure 8 motion. Like, where do you even come up with a name like that, the waggle dance?
I love it.
Right? So they do this figure 8 flight, and scientists believe that the figure 8, the waggle dance, communicates to the other bees 3 things. First, how far the flowers are. Second, what direction those flowers are in. And third, they think it even communicates something about the quality of the nectar and the pollen in those flowers. It has to be so detailed to communicate all these things. But a bee, if it is overworked, if it is tired, it cannot perform the waggle dance correctly. And so even a busy bee relies on regular patterns and intervals of rest in order to be able to communicate and do its work well.
And if a bee needs rest, surely a human being, sorry, I had to do that, needs rest. Like, I think I consider myself more of a human doing. I'll just tell you the truth, Eryn. And I know that I have a God who says, be still and know that I am God. So what do you think happens inside the human heart when we choose to do that, when we sit down and maybe even especially in nature?
I think we are returning to God's original design when we practice being still, and we're truly learning how to be human again.
Yeah.
How God designed us to be. And it's beautiful because when we look at the Psalms, there's actually 2 different words for be still. And the first is the one we normally think about, Psalm 46:10, be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted in the earth. Let me just say, when we look at the full context of that passage, it beautifully shows us that God is sovereign over things outside of our control. It shows that he is sovereign over natural disasters, war, human authority, and powers. So first of all, we can be still and rest, knowing that God is sovereign over all the circumstances that we cannot control. But that word, be still, in the original Hebrew, it gives the imagery of sinking. Now, of course, not sinking into despair or discouragement, but sinking into God's restful embrace and into his capable hands. It can mean to release and to let go. The NASB version, it says, stop striving and know that I am God. But then there's also another word for be still in the Psalms, in Psalm 37:7, which says, be still before the Lord and wait patiently for him.
Wow.
That's a different Hebrew word, and it means to quiet ourselves and wait. And so as we enter into God's rest, we are learning to be still. We are learning to let go of everything we can't control and sink into his restful embrace. And as we do, we're able to quiet ourselves and to wait on his provision and his plan.
I'm going to share that scripture with my daughter because she's going through some real deep pain, like physical pain right now. And I picture her waiting before the Lord. That's beautiful, Eryn. I want to know, like, your favorite place to find peace and just to let God delight in you in nature. Like, where do you go? What does it look like for you?
Oh, I love going to the wilderness, and thankfully I have a lot of wilderness around where I live. But I really believe we can get into God's creation wherever we are, even if we need to go find those little pockets of nature and drive a little further. But it's beautiful when we look at the Gospels. Jesus really modeled this life of rest for us, and he went away often he called it the quiet place. It's the word eremos in the Greek. And we read that in Mark chapter 1 when Jesus rose early and went to a desolate or quiet place, eremos, and there he prayed. And that word eremos, it's most often translated as wilderness. And we see it again in Mark chapter 6. After a really busy season of ministry, Jesus' disciples come back to him. And Jesus, I just imagine he could see and feel their fatigue and their overwhelm. And he said, come away by yourselves to a quiet, eremos place and rest a while. And so just getting out, whatever that place looks like to you, whether it's your backyard at sunrise or a little garden spot down the street or quite literally in the wilderness, making that a regular practice so that we can get away to a quiet place with our Father and rest a while.
I'm going to take him up on that invitation. I love talking with you, Eryn, and your book is beautiful. It's called The Nature of Rest. It's a 6-week Bible study that's doable for anybody. Eryn is also the host of the podcast Nat Theo. It's fantastic. Eryn Lynum, it is always such an honor to hang out with you. Please come back soon.
Thank you, Erica. Thanks so much for having me. I would love to.